Hey everyone! Before we open today's file, please make sure to follow us on Instagram at d.s.radio, where you can find all the images that go along with today's case. You can drop us an email at contact.dsradio@gmail.com. You can find all of our socials in the Linktree bio on our Instagram profile, including links to merch. If you're feeling especially generous, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio, where you can get access to our exclusive Instagram page and make suggestions for upcoming episode topics that you would like us to cover. Speaking of Patreon, thanks to our Patreons, Riff Cult, Cropley Crab, Cash Broadus, Raspberry Jr., Jason R. Nelson, Creepy Paper, Jamie Sook, Michael Laughlin, Lindsay Keller, Mike Wright, Greer Weaver, Kelsey Carithas, Linz Gibbon, Drake Holvig, Only Child, Michael M, Wesley Akers, Riaz K, Emily Medeiros, Pip, Heather Wynn, Graves, Devon Sweatshirt, The Ordained Sinister Minister, and Philip Hoffman.
Hi everybody and welcome to Dystopian Simulation Radio. My name is Chris.
I'm Linz.
And we are your hosts on this journey through the archives. How are you doing today, Linz?
Yeah, good. You know, first coffee down the hatch, ready to go, hot off the heels of the Hexam Heads.
Yeah.
If you haven't heard that, go back and listen.
And how are you generally feeling in your physical state? You okay?
Terrible. To be honest with you.
So are you experiencing perhaps any grogginess or...
Yeah.
Yeah? How about an insatiable hunger for human flesh?
Now that you mention, you're looking very tasty.
I am a snack. So today's episode we're going to dive into in just a moment. Before I do that...
Remember everybody, if you want to follow along and look at the images, you can do so at d.s.radio on Instagram.
And where can they find our Patreon?
Patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio.
So feel free to join us over there. And one thing I'd like to do is just to give everyone a little bit of a goal. If you've enjoyed today's episode, what I'd like to ask you to do is please leave us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. It really does help the algorithm and help new people discover our dumbass podcast.
Yeah, please take a minute to give us a 5-star review if you enjoy today's episode, and please go listen to our previous episodes too.
So the topic of today's episode was chosen by our Patreon supporters. I put a poll up asking which topic our Patreons would prefer a future episode to be about. Would they prefer it to be on zombies or vampires?
Ooh.
And as you may have guessed from my questioning for you at the beginning of today's episode, zombies won with 75% of the vote. So enjoy this episode today on Dracula. No, we're doing a zombie episode. And you can influence future episodes by joining our Patreon as well.
You're a silly man, Chris.
So today we are going to be looking at a very specific case involving a zombie. But first, a little background on zombies. 12 years too late and 11 seasons into The Walking Dead. Let's jump on that bandwagon. So zombies really became popularized as we think of them in the modern concept. Mindless, shambling corpses only motivated by sweet, sweet brains. In the 1960s, when George A. Romero released his first zombie film, Night of the Living Dead, the feature that spawned 100 sequels and 1 million rip-offs. That's not to say that zombies didn't exist as a concept beforehand, but this 1968 film cemented the ideas of zombies as we think of them today into the public consciousness. As hinted at before, in the 1960s and 70s, there was an explosion of zombie movies, both at home and abroad, which eventually began to slow in the 1980s when horror veered into the slasher genre. By the 1990s, zombies seemed somewhat of a neglected concept in popular culture, until two popular series returned the humble zombie to the forefront of our hearts, or brains. Firstly, in 1996, the very first Resident Evil video game was released, quickly followed up by sequels in 1998 and 99. The train hasn't stopped since, and in the late 80s and early 2000s, it often seemed to be the lone bastion waving the zombie flag, keeping the idea alive, or should I say undead. Then in 2003, Robert Kirkman released his first issue of the Walking Dead graphic novel, which was in turn made into a television series of the same name in 2010, which launched a full-blown zombie revival around the world. And as we record this in 2022, the bubble seems to have burst a little bit on the zombie craze. For a time you couldn't move for zombie content, but now it seems that we're on the other side of that, and you have to wonder what's next for horror trends. The bookies are betting on mummies, but I'm predicting that this will be the decade of El Chupacabra.
I hope so. God, I hope so. I'd like to see Bigfoot do a comeback.
Bigfoot's due a comeback.
Yeah, he's definitely due a comeback.
A greatest hits tour. So, Linz, you've watched a zombie movie or two in your day.
Oh, yeah. Just a couple.
Most of them with me. So, what are your favourite zombie movies?
Obviously, Night of the Living Dead, you've got to say that. Dawn and Day. Return of the Living Dead Part 2. Mm-hmm. 20 Days Later, I do class it as a zombie movie.
Yeah, well, they're infected, but they're zombies.
Yeah, they're zombies. First running zombies. Or one of the first running zombies. I like Zombie Flesh Eaters 2, I think it is, where the zombie walks to New York under the water and punches a shark or bites a shark or something. Can't quite recall. So many good ones. Zombie movies.
But what evidence do we have that zombies are real? We have to look.
Oh, Shaun of the Dead, sorry. Just came to me.
Well, that's not a documentary.
No, I meant my favourite. Okay, I'm going to stop thinking about zombie movies. What evidence do we have? Maybe it's not evidence, but maybe in Africa where people rise from their graves after hoodoo spells. I don't think they really do rise from their graves, but maybe they do.
Don't they, Lindsay?
You're looking at me
Don't they?
You're looking at me in a strange way.
Can you hear me stroking the hairs of my chinny chin chin?
I can even see you doing it.
Well, first we have to look to beautiful Mother Nature. Sorry, horrific Mother Nature. Now, anyone who has played the game The Last of Us will be aware of cordyceps. They're great games, by the way, and you might not be aware, though, that cordyceps is actually real. The only difference being that in the games, it's jumped to human beings, and it's a fungal infection that takes over human beings, turns them into zombies. Yeah.
Fungal.
Now, in real life, it does actually exist. It affects various species of small insect, most famously ants. Cordyceps itself is actually a type of fungi, which spores infect an ant, in this particular case, and begin to take a hold of the ant's body and its mind as it grows. It alters the ant's behavior to climb up to the highest place that it can, so that when the fruiting body, i.e. the mushroom, bursts from the ant's body, its spores have the highest chance of future infection because they'll be carried further due to the wind.
Another thing to be scared of. Thank you, Chris.
That's all right. Now, there's various types of cordyceps. They all target a specific creature, and they've not jumped to mammals yet.
Oh, God.
Researchers have found that cordyceps actually takes control of the ant's muscle fibers and compels them to climb. So check out our Instagram page where I'm going to post some actual footage of this.
No.
Do you want to see it?
Yes.
Come here.
Ew.
So, Linz, what did you think of that footage that you just saw?
That was horrific and beautiful at the same time. Yeah, it's like weird to see the ant clearly against its will, climbing something against its will. You can really tell that it's confused and it's not in control. And then that sort of, what did they say, 3 weeks? It could take 3 weeks for the...
Up to 3 weeks for the fruiting body to erupt.
Yeah, so basically there's like a fungus growing from the ant's head, like reaching out like a sort of terrifying finger. And then there's just like a compilation, I guess, of different animals and this fungus blooming out of them. And it's very eerie. And they did play sort of spooky, like ghost movie piano music behind it that made it kind of more creepy. But yeah.
When you've got an old British man whispering over the top of it.
Yeah, breathing on the back of your ear. But that was very interesting. I knew that like crickets and insects can get parasites and then they get eaten by birds and then they take over the bird. And yeah. I knew about that, but not this. Not like the fungus blossoming out of like their hosts as they die and sit there. That's really interesting.
Well, another example from nature that I'd like to talk about today, because I feel it's quite relevant to the story. There are various species of wasp that can alter the behavior of insects, cockroaches, for example. They are prey to the jewel wasp, who targets specific spots in the cockroach's brain with their stinger and deposits just enough venom to allow the wasps to have their wicked way. The cockroach remains motionless until the wasp is ready to bite off its antenna and lead the cockroach for a walk in which the cockroach, having received this dose of venom, willingly complies. The wasp brings the cockroach to its burrow, where it then infects the cockroach with an egg on its leg. The egg begins to develop into another jewel wasp, and then, when it's ready, burrows inside the cockroach and eats it from the inside out, starting with the least important organs first, until eventually it cracks open out of the carcass like an alien, leaving only the hollow body of a cockroach.
Oh my gosh, Chris. That is absolutely disturbing. I'm never sleeping again. I already didn't like wasps, and now I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's so gross.
Horrible. In humans, thankfully, there are no mushrooms nor parasitic wasps that can turn us into flesh-eating monstrosities with an insatiable lust for brains. However, the characteristics of zombies can be seen in 2 states in humans, potentially.
What?
The first, the possible origin story for the zombie, as portrayed on film, is rabies.
Yeah.
Rabies is caused by the Lyssa virus and is transmitted to humans via a scratch or a bite. And this can be technically any mammal that becomes infected with this, but most commonly it's dogs or bats. Once the infection has taken place, it is initially difficult to detect by the host. The incubation period in humans lasts between 1 and 3 months before undeniable symptoms present. Initially, the virus can be mistaken for many other common conditions. And actually, rabies itself in its early stages is very easily treatable, but once symptoms appear, death is guaranteed in a week to 10 days. Humans with rabies can, but not always, exhibit aggressive behaviour, which starts off with just feeling irritable. So if you're feeling like you got up on the wrong side of the bed this morning, maybe it's rabies. This can progress to what is sometimes referred to as furious rabies, where a patient kicks and lashes out. And typically, regardless of what type of rabies they have, rabies patients are restrained for the protection of those around them. If this furious stage is survived, you would enter into the next stage, in which the patient essentially foams at the mouth and loses all control until death.
Lovely.
This accounts for 80% of human rabies cases, apparently, the other 20% being known as dumb rabies, which essentially just paralyzes the hosts. The results are the same, though, certain death, just without the aggression.
Dumb rabies.
Dumb rabies.
I think that's what I have.
would explain a lot. Now, according to the World Health Organization, although rabies is non-existent, such as many places as Western Europe, Japan, the USA, Canada, and so on, it still kills 59,000 people worldwide each year. It is theoretically possible for a human to pass on the infection to another human via a bite, just like a zombie, although no case has ever been reported of this, likely due to the fact that humans tend to have been restrained in care by the time that this furious stage kicks in. And humans don't use their mouths to bite normally anyway.
Speak for yourself.
Interestingly, it is thought, it's hypothesized, that the virus also makes its way to the sexual organs and could be a sexually transmitted disease, although no known cases of this exists. So the next time you have some really wild sex, just think, do I have rabies now? Human-to-human infection of rabies is extremely rare, and all recorded cases have been via organ transplants from unknowingly infected donors.
No, that's terrible. Imagine being on like a list and going, I finally got my organ, and then you just start foaming at the mouth.
It's infected. The other state that induces potentially zombie-like behavior in humans is actually self-inflicted. So cast your mind back to May 26th, 2012, the day after my 25th birthday, when I was younger and now I'm so old. On that day, Rudy Eugene assaulted a homeless man named Ronald Popo under a causeway in Miami, Florida. After accusing Ronald of stealing his Bible, Rudy beat him unconscious, removed his pants, and then bit off most of Ronald's face above the beard line. Rudy was killed on the scene after refusing to stop cannibalizing Ronald's face when he was shot by police. Now, Ronald, a 65-year-old homeless man, was then rushed to hospital, where his family were amazed to find him still alive.
Oh, dear God.
Presuming that he died years prior.
Oh, okay.
He needed extensive reconstructive surgery on his face, but the attack left him blind in both eyes. He was eventually granted indefinite leave to remain at the medical facility, where he has relearned how to perform daily tasks. He's returned to a normal weight. After years of living on the streets, has learned how to play the guitar.
Oh, that's nice. I mean, horrific. Nice ending, I think.
The reason why I bring up this case is because at the time it was widely reported in the media that Rudy Eugene's behaviour was the result of taking the drug known as bath salts, or in the UK, it's sometimes called monkey dust.
It is?
It is now. The US was right at the start of the popularity of bath salts, with 304 cases reported to the US poison centres in 2010, which then rose to 6,138 in 2011. This incident, known as a Miami zombie, taking place the year after that. Panic gripped the nation as this mysterious drug with the power to turn ordinary humans into flesh-eating psychopaths was running through America. Reagan was turning in his grave. It happened to a man down the street, and I heard there's someone dealing it at the school. Won't somebody please think of the children? In reality, the only drug that was found in the toxicology report was marijuana, but it was deemed inconclusive because several unknown pills were found undigested in his stomach. Coroners suggested that this aggressive behaviour was consistent with that of somebody on bath salts, but taken to the extreme. So perhaps this was just some new kind of bath salt that had not yet been identified. Due to the inconclusive nature of the toxicology report, the jury is out on what actually caused the attack, but if bath salts were involved, it's almost certainly just one of the factors that played a role in the Miami zombie.
I think it was most likely the Necronomicon.
However, there is some truth to the behaviour patterns of one on bath salts. So the American Addictions resource mentalhelp.net says,
the following effects of bath salts may explain tendencies towards aggressive behavior or violence. Dopamine is associated with the control of motivation impulses and some dimensions of emotional perception. Bath salts alter dopamine concentrations. These alterations can lead to an increased tendency towards enthusiasm and hyperactivity, as well as bizarre or apparent behaviors. Dopamine altercations can also cause agitation and reduced impulse control, which may enhance aggressive tendencies.
So it is possible for drugs to make you more aggressive. Bath salts seemingly especially so, but that does not lead us to the conclusion that injecting the drug results in eating the face of a homeless man you are mildly acquainted with.
Mildly acquainted? You passed him in a bridge.
Likely this was just a drug panic from the media whipping people up into a frenzy. There was no epidemic of face cannibalism that swept the nation. Rudy Eugene was, however, of Haitian descent. And while that's just a coincidence, it does nicely lead us onto our next stop on this shuffle around the world. The idea of a zombie as we know it seems to have evolved from the Haitian concept of the zombie. Haiti is located on an island in the Bahamas known as Hispaniola, which shares half of the island with the Dominican Republic. Haiti is famous for voodoo, or at least the Haitian version of voodoo. Linz, define voodoo!
Oh, just casting spells and doing rituals to get things that you want or need.
You're getting there, but here's a definition that I prepared for you earlier from the finest source, Wikipedia.
Ah. Okay, a little bit of a novel to read for you here. Do forgive me if I butcher the pronunciations of some of this, but voodoo revolves around spirits known as Iwa, typically deriving their names and attributes from traditional West and Central African divinities. They are equated with Roman Catholic saints. The Iwa divide up into different groups. The Nanchon, or nations, most notably the Rada and the Peitu. Various myths and stories are told about these Iwa, which are regarded as subservient to a transcendent creator deity Bonde. Voodooists usually meet to venerate the Iwa in an unfo, or temple. A central ritual involves practitioners drumming, singing, and dancing to encourage the Iwa to possess one of their members and thus communicate with them. Offerings to the Iwa include fruit, liquor, and sacrificed animals. Offerings are also given to the spirits of the dead. Several forms of divination are utilized to decipher messages from the Iwa. Healing rituals and the preparation of herbal remedies and talismans also play a predominant role. Most Haitians practice both voodoo and Roman Catholicism, seeing no contradiction in pursuing the two different systems simultaneously. Voodoo has faced much criticism through its history, having repeatedly been described as one of the world's most misunderstood religions.
So voodoo is famous for two things in the Western mindset: voodoo dolls and zombies. Zombies are probably the most sensationalized aspect of this misunderstood religion. Zombies are believed to be created by a boko, and boko are those who work with an evil Iwa, or spirit. And there's much suspicion in Haiti amongst believers about who may be a boko. From my cursory knowledge of voodoo, and we don't profess to be experts in this, it helped me to think of a boko as witches or sorcerers, and the attitude towards them being akin to a witch hunt in puritanical times. Many believe that a boko can cause a person's death, and their little angel inside their soul, there's a little one and a large one, don't ask, we'll be here all day, but that is what they take hold of, is the little angel. By seizing this little angel, they leave the victim dead and compliant to their demands, leading them easily, much like our friend the jewel wasp does to the cockroach. Haitians don't actually fear zombies, they're simply a vessel. The fear of being turned into a zombie is the true fear of those who believe in voodoo. And this brings us to your friend and mine, famous for allegedly being a zombie, Clairvius Narcisse.
Oh, my dear friend.
Yes, I saw him just yesterday. He looked awful.
Who is that?
On April 30th, 1962, the doors of the Schweizer Hospital swung open in Haiti, and in stumbled Clairvius Narcisse, 40 years old, looking 400. The American-trained staff who operated the Haitian hospital rushed to his attention. He was fatigued and running a high fever. Most concerningly, he was spitting up blood. None of the medical staff could diagnose or explain what was happening to him until he died 3 days later. His death was verified by the medical team, including Americans on staff, and he was taken to the morgue and then buried shortly afterwards. Flash forward to 1980, and Angelica Narcisse, Clairvius' sister, is going about her daily tasks in the town of Leicester, where she lives, when suddenly a man approaches her, greeting her warmly. She doesn't know this man, but then the words come out of his lips. "It's me, your brother."
No.
Linz, put yourself in Angelica's position. What's going through your mind here?
Not again. No. I would just think it was someone playing a really cruel prank on me or something. I don't know. That's just really weird. I'd probably think I misheard.
Well, Angelica did, of course, not believe him.
Yeah.
But then he reveals to her, by sharing his childhood nickname, that he is her brother.
Well, wouldn't his childhood friends know his childhood nickname?
No, this is only a name that he was called inside the family.
Ooh.
And then he reveals to other people within the family intimate details that only would be known to a family member. So he convinces everybody who knew him, quite literally, in a previous life, that he was indeed Clairvius. He also bore a scar on his cheek that he claimed was from scraping against a coffin nail. So now they're on board with him. They have their deceased loved one back again, and it's a miracle that all families could ever wish for. But for Clairvius, he claimed this miracle was only the result of a nightmare. So he said that when he died at the hospital, he was actually only paralyzed to the point of appearing dead. He was then buried alive by the authorities and his family unknowingly, and he believed that he would die there, in that coffin, 6 feet under the ground. It was much to his surprise then, when the nails were pulled from the coffin and he saw the light of day again, except this was probably happening at night. Shut up. There, in front of his paralyzed body, was a boko, presumably the cause of his apparent death in the first place. It has been hypothesized that he was then given a neurotoxin known as tetrodotoxin, which paralyzes in its natural form, and when modified, can mimic death. The Canadian ethnobotanist Wade Davis researched into the hypothetical process of this, who said, the boko would have... Now, hold on. Don't we know a Canadian who could do this for us?
Oh my god, Jordan!
Oh, hi, Jordan, from the Nighttime Podcast.
The Bokor would have given Narcisse a powder containing the tetrodotoxin through abraded skin. Narcisse would have then fallen into a comatose state closely resembling death, which resulted in his live burial. His body would have then been recovered, and he would have been given doses of Datura stramonium to create a compliant, zombie-like state, and set to work on a plantation. After 2 years, the plantation owner died, and Narcisse would have simply walked away to freedom.
I love Jordan.
Me too. He did a really good job on that, considering that the only pronunciation guide I gave him was on how to say Narcisse, and said, do your best on the medical terms. I'm not a doctor. So make sure you check out the Nighttime Podcast for everything weird from Canada. You won't regret it.
It's such a great podcast. I'm such a fanboy. I'm a Jordan simp.
So tetrodotoxin is derived from a pufferfish, also known as fugu, if you remember the Simpsons episode. By itself, it's not enough to cause zombification, but if it is modified by adding in the secretions of the poisonous cade tone Bufo marinus as an anesthetic companion drug, as well as the reed Datura stramonium, which is said to cause the mind-trolling element. So if you're out this week doing a quick Tesco or Target trip or whatever, you've got a new recipe to try.
An undead cocktail.
So in reality, Wade Davis, the ethnobotanist, actually popularized this theory, especially the use of tetrodotoxin. He was not the first to propose the theory. It had been reported that pufferfish had played a role in zombification as early as 1938. The widest proponent of this theory, though, is Davis, and he has both gone over to Haiti, he's met Clairvius, and he's also written several books on Narcisse, including the popular The Serpent and the Rainbow, which was eventually turned into a Wes Craven movie.
Oh, really?
It wasn't supposed to be. It was supposed to be a serious piece. And then, no, they just turned it into like a full-on horror
gets his
movie.
claws on it. Is it good? Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it, but it's on my list to watch now.
Yeah, same.
However, Davis has been on the end of some serious academic criticism for a lack of factual foundation in his theories. It's thought in these circles that Davis is not deliberately making things up, but is rather using bad science to reach his conclusions. Davis responded to his critics by claiming that the fourth element required was a cultural belief. A bit like hypnosis, it only works if you believe it's going to work.
Mm.
Regardless, it is an interesting theory as to how this took place, and I wouldn't totally dismiss it, but more research needs to be conducted if you can find more zombies.
Bad science.
So, Linz, what do you think about this story so far, where we're at?
It's bonkers. It's quite overwhelming. Like, I'm still thinking about the zombie mushroom ants.
We've moved way beyond that.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just like, it could happen to a person. Oh, toxins. Oh yeah, mixing the toxins make a zombie. And I'm like, what is happening? Yeah, but trying to prove that this man is in fact a zombie, it's unsurprisingly hard to believe. But I'm not surprised that somebody has dedicated their life to writing books about it and trying to... There's always one. There's always one who dedicates their life to a strange subject and tries to convince us all for decades only to die, and then we all go, remember that guy who tried to convince us zombies were real? And now you're that guy, Chris.
Hello. So now we know possibly how this could have occurred.
Yeah.
But to what end? Why was Clairvius turned into a zombie by the Boko? There are a few theories, but let's start with what Clairvius was made to do. He was reportedly taken to join many other zombies working on a sugar plantation.
Oh.
So this guy was sorcerer by night, a wealthy plantation owner by day. The man from Del Monte says yes. While working on a plantation, he'd be given regular top-up doses of the mind-controlling weed, Datura, to keep him compliant in harvesting that sweet, sweet sugar. After 2 years of hard labour, that particular poison-placating plantation person passed. It took Clairvius a further 16 years after the death of the plantation master to fully recover his memories prior to zombification. It was at this point that he ventured back to his hometown, approached his sister, where he was then turned away by his family. Ironically, because they believed him. He initially spent time sleeping at a cell in a police station, but in his town was forever an outcast. Voodoo being a belief of many of the local people, they simply considered him the man who was dead but got over it.
Oh my god, that's so brutal.
However, once a zombie, always a zombie, as they say.
As they say, they do say that.
Now, there is some footage of he and his sister together, so they may have had some kind of a tangible relationship, but he didn't pop in for afternoon tea very often. But wait, there's more. Clairvius may have brought this forced labour zombification upon himself. Some say that because he had broken social constructs by abandoning his wife and children earlier in life, others say that the Bokor was actually collecting a bounty, Bokor Fett, if you will.
You nerd. That's pretty good.
I was proud of that one. I was proud of that one.
That was good, I'll give you that.
So the bounty was due to a land dispute between Narcisse and his brother. Jerry. So according to Narcisse himself, his brother sold him to a Bokor, where he was tried and found guilty of his crimes by the masters of the land, although he never expanded more on that. Research done into this suggests that there may be, or may have been, secretive societies running things at a village level in Haiti, judging the worst offenders of society and essentially allowing Bokor to get their zombie on with the guilty parties. Narcisse, as a family abandoner, and possibly creating a rift in his family with this land dispute, would be a perfect candidate for a judgment of zombification. Other zombies interviewed by Davis, what a sentence, have claimed to be judged for thieving and other crimes prior to zombification.
Imagine just stealing something and then someone makes you into a zombie.
I know. I mean, that's a deterrent.
It's hardcore. Like, what if you start... Well, they're probably not stealing from Walmart. It's probably like someone's personal property. Yeah.
Narcisse passed away for a second time in 1994, aged 72. Narcisse seemingly never profited from this. While he gained interest abroad, he simply garnered fear at home. So Narcisse's case of zombification is unique in the fact that his passing was recorded by medical professionals. And a bit like our first episode on Bob Taylor, which you should go back and listen to if you haven't listened to it yet. It's the only alien encounter investigated by the British police. This instance is verified to some degree by professionals, in this case doctors. Wade Davis has continued to stick to his story. He's published several academic papers on zombification and has even had his book, as I mentioned, The Serpent and the Rainbow, turned into a movie.
By Wes Craven.
Yeah. Well, the producers changed lanes and then just hired Wes Craven to direct it and just go horror with it. Voodoo, of course, continues to exist. It hasn't gone anywhere. And it's the fantastical elements that continue to fascinate Hollywood, that they are just a small part of what is an actual religion. It's derived from Africa, but distilled in Haiti. Paring it down to simply a sorceress, dolls, and zombies is incredibly reductive and offensive to people who practice voodoo. Voodooists simply follow their local religion, and nobody wants to be a zombie.
Speak for yourself, Chris.
Well, I know a boko or two who could help you out.
No! I want to work on a sugar plantation, though.
Well, what do you think? What are your thoughts on Narcisse's case? Real zombie interned at a sugar plantation? Or charlatan deceiving his town for unknown reasons?
I want to say charlatan right away, but I didn't really get anything from it.
No.
Other than just being outcast and lonely. And I feel like maybe he was just being actively drugged each day and pushed out onto a plantation, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than sort of enchanted by somebody.
Yeah.
I think maybe he was just getting forced out into the field and drugged. I mean,
if you take the view that the voodoo element of it is just window dressing, it doesn't actually do anything.
Yeah.
If he's given some kind of mind-controlling or pacification type of drug, it still kind of holds up. If he's being drugged and pushed out to do work...
then you're not a zombie, you're like a trafficked individual.
Well, exactly. That's where the difference comes into it.
Yeah.
You could argue that maybe he's Haitian. He's well aware of voodoo. This event happens to him. And then he has, dreams or fantasies when he's heavily drugged that kind of relate what you'd think. And, if you hear a bump in the night, the first thing you think of is ghost, not, oh, that cup that I left precariously on the sideboard just fell off.
Yeah, true.
Your mind goes to, a cultural weird event first. And if you've been drugged, maybe you would think that it was a result of voodoo.
Maybe.
So that is the story of Clairvius Narcisse, and also a bit of background on where zombies come from and how they have a potential basis in nature. If you're just about to have a meal after this, and maybe you're having pasta with some mushrooms, just think, are those mushrooms cordyceps?
This could have been inside an ant.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for listening to today's file that we've dived in for you on zombies. As I said, this was chosen by our Patreon supporters. We're hopefully going to be doing a few more polls and things in the future, and you can always suggest episodes for us to do, much like last week's episode, the Hexam Heads, which was suggested by one of our Patreons, and we then, or rather Lindsay, jumped head first into it. And dug up all kinds of information. So we'd love to hear what you want to hear. So if you do want to join us over on Patreon, where can they find us, Linz?
Patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio.
That's right. And you can either join at the £1 level, where you're just really kind of supporting us and you'll get a shout out on the podcast, or you can join at the £5 level, where you get access to all the behind-the-scenes material that we post up there. And don't forget as well to check up our Instagram,
d.s.radio,
where you can see all the images for today's episode.
Yay. Thanks so much, Chris. Great episode. And another thing to keep me awake at night.
As if that wasn't enough. See you next week, everybody.
Bye, maybe.
The reason why I bring this up is at the time in the media it was widely reported that Rudy Eugene's behaviour was a result of taking the known drug bath salts. Fuck.